Hello everybody, welcome to Deluxe Collectibles, and today we're going to be doing my reaction and review for Amphibia Season 2, Episode 6, Marcy at the Gates. And I'm super excited for this episode, so if you want to watch my review for it, be sure to go down below to the top of the description of this video, where you'll find a link leading you over to Google Photos, where you'll be able to view my full uncut reaction for the episode. And then when you're finished watching that, you can come back over to YouTube, where this video, which will be my full spoiler review for the episode, and that's what we're going to get started here. So I would recommend, of course, watching the episode, checking out the reaction, but without further ado, let's get into it. So this episode was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing. Definitely one of the best ones of this season, and this season has honestly not had a bad episode. I would even say Season 1 never had a bad episode, but they took that season and just made it even better, which I didn't even think was possible, but they were able to do it. So this episode, of course, hence the title of it, we get to meet Marcy in the episode, but starting off at the beginning, it's basically they're still traveling here, and Anne's kind of thinking back about her friends, and she's really feeling bad about kind of how things went with Sasha, and she's really hoping that when she finds Marcy that she's hopefully able to kind of just rekindle that relationship that they had back in like the human world basically. And she's just kind of feeling like really just like alone in that aspect and really wanting to find her. And Sprig kind of asks about her, and it prompts Anne to kind of have a bit of a flashback and kind of explain Marcy basically and their friendship back in the human world. And we get to learn a lot about Marcy. She's a very clumsy person, she's a gamer as well, and she's very smart also, so we get to learn all of those aspects, kind of see a little bit of their friend dynamic and how Anne's kind of always looking out for her, kind of being the one who's saving her from like, because she's super clumsy, she's fallen over things, she's almost getting herself hurt, so Anne's kind of the one looking out for her. And meanwhile, you kind of also get to see in these flashbacks that Sasha's kind of someone who's just like it seems like she cares, but she's also doesn't care as much as Anne. It kind of feels like Anne's the one kind of holding that friend group together, and Sasha's the one trying to kind of take control of that group, and then Marcy's just the one there having a good time. Like, Marcy is fantastic in this episode. The vibe that she brings to it, and the just fun, energetic sort of energy that she has to it, it almost kind of makes me think of like kind of like Mabel in Gravity Falls, and this character Marcy even has a grapple hook as well, which in the reaction I do call out as soon as she uses it. I'm like, yes, Mabel. Like, every time I see a grapple hook in like any show, I'm like, Mabel reference, even though I know it might not be, but I always think of that personally. But basically, so we get to see all of that. We kind of get to learn about the backstory there of her, and then we wind up finally arriving at Newtopia, and they wind up having to cross through this huge thing of water, and it's pretty funny because they see Newtopia, it's this epic grand moment, and then they just cut to them just slowly walking through the water. Anne's like, my feet are getting soaked, and it's kind of like you're contrasting it with just a very anticlimactic moment. And then they make it to the gates, and they're basically told by the gatekeeper that they're not going to be able to get in because there are barbarian ants, and it's basically these gigantic ants that are just like barbarians basically, and they're kind of like tearing up things, so they kind of have to get things under control, of course, before they're gonna let anybody in to Newtopia. And that's where Marcy comes in. So we get to see that basically it's kind of funny, they kind of set it up and then pay it off very quickly. We see a hole in the ground when they're walking through the water, and Polly's like, this seems like it'll wind up coming into play later on. And then literally like 2 minutes later, we see the ants coming over, and then they go into the hole, and then we wind up having Marcy come down, and she grapples her way down. Now she does wind up like shooting an arrow, and like she basically sets a flame trap in the water and then lights it on fire to kind of scare off the ants from Anne and everyone else, like Polly, Sprig, and Hot Pop. And basically she winds up defending them there, but as she's coming down on her grapple hook, she winds up falling off of it and just face planting into the water. And that's kind of what prompts Anne to think, Marcy, is that you? And then they wind up having this really great reunion. Like, It was fantastic. It was very heartfelt, and you can really feel that Anne just really missed her friend, and she's just so grateful to have a friend from like the human world who's not someone who's trying to go up against her. Like when she met up with Sasha, you could really tell that she just wanted to kind of rekindle that friendship that they had previously, but now things are different. Sasha has definitely some different views on this new world that they've been thrown into, and Anne's just so glad to see Marcy, and Marcy it is just as glad, I would say. She's a fantastic character, just a really fun personality, and it really blends well with Anne. I would say Sasha's more of a serious character who's more about getting business done, but with Marcy, she's kind of embraced this world similar to how Anne has. So it's nice to see that two people who are just kind of enjoying what they're going through here. And I kind of talked about how it's kind of like Marcy's kind of playing this like a video game. She's trying to level up through it and kind of like help everybody in Newtopia, because that's where she wound up getting teleported to when she entered the world. So she just kind of sticks around there and is kind of has a reputation as a sort of protector for them and a hunter as well. So she winds up helping all of them. And then we get to see basically kind of her clumsy side a little bit, and also her cape. This is a running joke throughout the episode, so I'll probably only mention it this one time, but her cape winds up getting set on fire multiple times in the episode, and it does initially as well in this introduction here, and it kind of reminded me, it's such a coincidence, I'd seen this video recently on YouTube, a compilation of from iCarly Spencer, like Carly's older brother, setting things on fire just spontaneously, and this completely reminded me of that, so it was kind of like maybe that's a semi callback to that. I know obviously iCarly's Nickelodeon and then this is Disney, but it's kind of a similar sort of idea there, and I think that it was really funny and well done within this episode, so I did quite enjoy that. But basically she introduces them to all of course, her new family here, who has kind of adopted her and brought her in, and she really appeals to like Polly, of course, because she's like this cool sort of action hero in her eyes, and also she tells her that she's going to wind up sprouting her legs in 2 months apparently, so maybe a little bit of a ticking timer on that we might see Polly take on more of an appearance similar to Sprig, and then be able to do a little bit more within the series. I think that she already does quite a bit, which is pretty impressive considering she doesn't even have her legs yet, but it seems like that could be something that we could wind up seeing in the future, since they've kind of planted the seed for it here within this episode. So I would be curious if it goes on for long enough, and if they do want to change up Polly's design, if they'll wind up doing that. But basically she winds up appealing to her through that, and then Hot Pop, who of course is a farmer, she winds up kind of like measuring his head and then finding out where he was from and saying like farmers are like the backbone and need to be more appreciated, and he of course really loves that, her opinion of that, and of course I think that's really true. Farmers do need to be really appreciated. They are a backbone basically, because they're producing all of the food and making sure they're growing crops and everything. So Hot Pop of course really takes a liking to her, and even at one point says like, would you like us to adopt you, Marcy? And I thought that was pretty funny. I'll be really happy if Marcy's made a big part of the series, at least within this season, or at least a part of the season, because she's a very fun character, and they seem to set it up at the end of the episode. We'll get to that later on, but to kind of be a part of the series in a big way. But Sprig is the one who's very like suspicious of Marcy and not really sure if she can be trusted, because of course with the previous thing that happened with Sasha, of her kind of betraying them, he doesn't really trust Anne's other friends, so he's kind of a little bit suspicious of her and kind of on guard for most of the time. But Marcy is just such a fun personality, it's really hard to find anything that could be suspicious with her. Sasha definitely had a few red flags around her, so you can kind of see that Marcy doesn't really, or isn't really showing any of those red flags. So we basically get to see them have that nice, like, they get to reunite there and have that nice moment, which was just really fantastic. It felt very heartfelt and personal as well. So I do like that, because of course both characters are going to feel a little bit homesick, so just to have a part of home come back to them is just really nice. So, of course, then we come back to basically this tent where you get to meet like these somewhat like scientists, I suppose, which is really funny. One of them like hits the other one with a book that says pacifism on it, or yeah, pacifism, I think, and I thought that was pretty funny, a pretty clever visual joke there, I would say. And basically they're kind of just explaining the way to kind of take down these gargantuan or barbarians. Sorry, I keep getting the name mixed up. I keep thinking of like gargantuans because they are giant, but of course, they're barbarians, but basically, they wind up meeting up with them, and then they kind of explain some of the things and where to find these ants, and they wind up going with Marcy, of course, and throughout them kind of entering this cave, Marcy is being very clumsy, and Anne feels like she keeps having to look out for her, and she kind of does. I mean, Marcy winds up falling down a hole, just having a whole bunch of troubles with her clumsiness, so Anne's kind of looking out for her as she originally did, so they're kind of in that same sort of dynamic, and of course, Marcy's changed though and kind of evolved by being put into this new world here. So she's gathering some samples basically to make like, she's kind of like an alchemist as well. So she's just like, it can do everything. She's very cool. There's a lot of really cool possibilities that her character sort of opens up, because Anne's, like, I think there are some secret things that of course will be revealed about Anne and more like sort of skills and abilities that she'll develop over time, but Marcy seems to be like at a higher level than her at the moment. Not saying that Anne's not good, but Anne's definitely more of a let's just fight and then we'll think about it later, while Marcy's more of like planning ahead and thinking of creative solutions and everything. So it's cool to kind of have that kind of thrown into the dynamic. So they basically wind up getting kind of attacked by these barbarians, and they wind up escaping. Now, at one point, she throws down this like vine potion basically that kind of traps them, and Polly winds up getting trapped behind it as well. Luckily, they're able to, of course, rescue her, but this causes Sprig to even have more suspicion surrounding Marcy, because he's like, I bet you she might have thrown that on purpose to kind of trap Polly and like kind of separate us or get rid of one of the members of the group. So he's still very suspicious of her, but then they basically wind up finding this queen ant here, who of course is the one that they have to get rid of, because then the rest of the ants will wind up following her and leaving. And it's really cute because you get to see the queen ant, who looks like ginormous and honestly quite terrifying, and she's just kind of like tucking her baby in with like this like gooey stuff, this gooey green substance, and Sprig's like, well, at least she's a good mother. And it's like, yeah, that is true. I mean, she's not bad. Like, of course, appearances can be a little bit deceiving, and you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but of course they're still causing issues, even if it might not be intentional, but they still kind of need to move them out of Newtopia and kind of eliminate that threat. So she has these stink mushrooms basically that are going to drive them away, so they wind up having to try to plant them around basically, and Anne's kind of looking out for her and saying that don't worry, we can kind of handle this, and Marcy's kind of having a little bit of an issue with Anne kind of like just like acting as if Marcy's the same person who she previously was, while meanwhile Anne's been away from her for quite a while, so she's evolved as a person and gained new skills and doesn't really need to be looked out for as much as she previously needed to. So basically they have that little bit of contention against each other, but of course, they're still friends and they still wind up working together. And Sprig, basically, he's planting his mushrooms and he winds up kind of triggering this queen, because the queen basically can only sense you through sound. And so they do it quietly, but then Sprig winds up messing it up. Sprig does not have the best luck within this episode. It's like a bit of a running thing within the episode that he is just not having the best day. But basically, he winds up getting trapped by the queen ant, which makes perfect sense because, of course, he gets trapped by the queen ant, and then Marcy's the one who can kind of only rescue him because she kind of understands how these ants work, and she winds up going to rescue her, but then Anne's like, no, you should just let me handle this. But then they have that moment where she's like, you just need to kind of trust me now, and so Marcy winds up going into the ant, basically letting it swallow her, beating it up from the inside, and then winds up rescuing Sprig. So Sprig winds up, he gives like this big starry-eyed face and is just like trustworthy and he's probably just about as happy as Anne was to find out that Marcy hasn't changed too much and she's still a good person, and now Sprig can kind of feel comfortable around her as well. So she winds up rescuing him, perfectly timed. All of the stink bombs wind up going off, driving the ants away, and it's just a really fantastic moment there. So they wind up defeating them basically, and the stink bombs all go off. They all wind up getting away. Marcy gets lit on fire again, of course, because you just gotta have that running joke just going on. And then they wind up being able to finally enter into Newtopia, and now they're able to enter there, and they basically, you kind of get to have a quick look at Newtopia. It feels like a very medieval sort of like village or city that they have, I suppose. And then we get to meet kind of the queen of Newtopia, basically, who welcomes them. Now, this queen, like, seems welcoming enough, just seems like a bit of a strict queen, which of course would kind of make sense. You kind of have to have a firm rule over your people. So it seems like bringing Anne here, and of course Hot Pop and Sprig and Polly, kind of throws off the dynamic a little bit. So she seems like she might be a little bit stern on them. I don't think necessarily she would be like evil, but there's always that small possibility. But anyway, Marcy winds up introducing her. They wind up getting acquainted basically, and she's just like, just make sure you don't touch anything. Of course, Sprig being Sprig winds up breaking one of the statues, and that queen's eye twitches a little bit, and she's a little bit like, I don't know if this is gonna really work out, but still enjoy your stay nonetheless. And then they have a nice moment where they're just kind of talking it out and just kind of discussing like how Anne reveals to Marcy basically that she found Sasha and that things didn't go too well. They got into a fight, so now she doesn't really know where Marcy's or where Sasha's at. So they kind of just talk about like how they just kind of need to learn to kind of like lead for themselves, because Sasha was kind of the leader of the group, or taking on that more bossy role for them, kind of telling them what to do, and now they're kind of left to make their own decisions. So that's going to definitely be interesting to see kind of their partnership grow, and I'll be really interested to see when they all wind up meeting up and wind up finding Sasha. That's going to be super interesting as well. And then they just wind up having a really nice moment. They're like striking some really cool power poses, of course, and then Anne basically is just kind of explaining some stories of what happened in previous episodes to her, catching Marcy up on everything that's gone on. And then at the end of the episode, we have a very mysterious moment where we see this character. We don't get to fully see them, we just kind of get to see a small portion of them. And they have like this chessboard basically, and they have a piece of Marcy on it, and then they put down a Anne like wood figure, and they're like, all of the pieces are kind of falling into place now. So it seems like there's someone behind everything that is going on. So I will be really interested to see what that kind of winds up leading to. So I don't know. I'm just very interested to see where they wind up taking that, and who this character is, how they're connected to like the humans, and if they were the ones who maybe brought Marcy, Anne, and Sasha into this world. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to find out. I don't want to speculate too much because I'm sure we're just going to wind up finding out in a future episode, and I kind of like to leave the mystery. I feel like sometimes if you speculate too much and hype it up a bit too much, then you can kind of wind up ruining it for yourself if it doesn't live up to your exact expectations. Now, I have a lot of confidence in this series. It's fantastic, so I'm sure it'll have a great payoff, but I like how they left that there. This felt like a very big episode, and it was just fantastic. 5 out of 5. Perfect episode, just amazing. Love Marcy as a character, cannot wait to see more of her. Can't wait to see when they finally meet up with Sasha as well and wind up. I'm sure it's going to be some sort of fight or battle because Sasha is of course still with Grime, so we'll have to see how that kind of winds up going, but yeah, just a great episode overall. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on the episode down below. What's been your episode or your favorite episode so far this season? I would honestly say this one's a high contender for it. Maybe this and like Wax Museum, because I just love Gravity Falls so much. That was such a great episode. And actually, if you for some reason haven't seen that episode or haven't seen my review, be sure to check that out. That's another video that I did. Of course, I've done reactions and reviews for every episode of Season 2 of Amphibia thus far, so if you want to stay tuned for future episodes as well, be sure to subscribe. I would really appreciate the support, and if you enjoyed this review and reaction video, be sure to leave a like as well. I would really appreciate that, and just thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time, and always remember, keep on collecting.